Postponement for the judgment, the hand down of former First Lady of Lesotho, Maesaea Thabane. Mrs. Thabane implores the court to consider her for bail to allow her to go and nurse her ailing husband and former Prime Minister Thomas Thabane. The judgment will now be handed down on Friday the 26th. Meanwhile, former Prime Minister and company is challenging the treason charges, citing the moratorium passed by SADC facilitator, former Deputy Chief Justice Maesaea. Maesaea had forged a Clause 10 agreement halting all political cases to be halted until the reforms process was completed. All right, let's catch up then with our reporter on the ground in Lesotho, Rapelang Khatebe. A very warm welcome to you as always, and thank you very much for joining us from the Mountain Kingdom.
Hi, Flo. A very chilly Mountain Kingdom up here.
I can imagine. All right, a lot of stories coming out of Lesotho today. One wonders, in fact, where to start. But I'll start with the First Lady, I suppose, because she fascinates me quite a bit. A number of issues relating to why the postponement in judgment. The First Lady Maesaea is saying that her husband, Thomas Thabane, is in fact ill, very ill, and she has to take care of him. Take us through what's going on, what's happening there, the latest in terms of that particular case. Let's start there.
Yeah, Flo, it's really like a story script just ripped out of a movie. Too many things going on in that particular case. But what we can say is, for the second day now, we have been watching, trying to get as to whether she will finally know as to whether her bail application will succeed or not. But for the second time now in a row, the judge has expressed that he's not feeling well and then postponed the day to be heard on the 26th, as things said. This only means the former First Lady will have to spend much more time, but also knowing the history of the judges and the court, many people are beginning to suspect as to whether is this just a legitimate technicality and delay that really people need to be worried of. But we hope that Friday is around the corner, and we hope to hear what will happen or what will come out.
All right, and then let's talk about the former Prime Minister Maesaea, of course, challenging his treason trial, saying that there's a Clause 10 moratorium by our own former justice, saying that, no case like this can continue. Take us through what, in fact, was indeed said by the former Chief Justice in terms of the fact that Clause 10 agreement halts all political cases, and how this indeed is being used by the former Prime Minister to kind of get out of this treason trial.
Flo, I lost you there for a minute, but I shall suppose I should just presume what your question was going to be.
All right, if you'd like me to say it again.
It's a bit of a long story considering where... Absolutely. I think I have a drift of where you are going.
Okay.
Justice Maesaea as the facilitator to, in the heat of just after the murdering of the former army commander, and there was a whole lot of others. So there are others who were implicated in this particular cases, and amongst them was a charge of treason that was preferred against former Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Maesaea. But Judge Maesaea came in and facilitated what we call the Clause 10 agreement, which was saying, considering a lot of political wrangling going on, it would be best perhaps to halt and have a moratorium as to what is going on in those particular matters. So he was to make sure that the smooth transition in order to facilitate for the reforms process happening in Lesotho, such that it becomes easier to deal with issues of that particular matter. So I think that case was challenged, but as things stand, they also want to say the SADC facilitation supersedes what they believe should be the case at this point.
All right, we'll definitely be catching up more and getting more information on that ongoing case. Of course, I'm trying to touch on the number of cases that are taking place in Lesotho. So pardon me for jumping so quickly from one topic to the other. The other news, quite a big story that also kind of hit South Africa in terms of the level of interest, is that of Lehlogonolo Scott, who's been slapped with a death sentence. Of course, interesting that Lesotho still has the death penalty, whereas in South Africa we no longer have it. He was, of course, charged with the double murder and harvesting of body parts. Take us briefly through what's happening with that particular case. He's already spent 5 years, I believe, in custody. So is that now, it is confirmed indeed at this point that, of course, he is going to the gallows?
Indeed. I think the law is still quite tricky, that particular case, Flo. Considering that we no longer have what we call the hangman in Lesotho. But he was sentenced to death. But others are also attributing that because he was a fugitive, he ran to South Africa and he came back as a deal. We know that one of the conditions in the is that a death sentence may not be executed or effected. Hence, they are now appealing for him to be sent to the gallows. But the law is still quite tricky. We await to hear as to whether it can actually go to an extent of him sent to the gallows. And the question is also who will actually now execute it? Who will actually make it happen now that the hangman is no longer available in Lesotho? But South Africa would definitely be interested as to how things will unfold going forward.
All right, Rapelang Khatebe, our correspondent in Lesotho, appreciate your time and, of course, giving us that wrap-up of all those news stories. Interesting indeed of those stories happening in Lesotho. Thank you for your time.